Good afternoon and welcome to this session of How the Light Gets In. I'm Ayesha Hazarika. I'm a political commentator and broadcaster and former political advisor to the UK Labour Party, and I'm delighted to be joined by Paul Krugman. We all know that he's one of the world's leading economists, winner of the Nobel Prize, and also one of America's most important political commentators and columnists with his New York Times column, which I'm sure you all read fastidiously. And he's also the author of many books, including How to Argue with Zombies. So I'm delighted to be here with Paul. Paul, welcome. We have to start with, there's only one story in town across the whole world, and of course that is the COVID crisis. And we have a huge public health crisis, which is colliding with a huge economic crisis that's coming down the track. We know that unemployment is huge in America, it's huge in countries all over the place, certainly here in the United Kingdom. There's been attempts at a stimulus, furloughing staff, trying to prop wages up. But what do you think governments should be doing now, and what should they be doing going forward to sort of try and shape and manage this huge, the mother of all recessions that's coming down the track?
Okay. The way to think about it, or the way I've been arguing, is that we should think about this as this is not a normal recession. And the response shouldn't be stimulus. It's actually kind of the wrong word to use for what we should be doing. We are shutting down economies because we should, because the way to cope with the pandemic is that you need to, as we say, not just flatten the curve, but crush it. You need to bring down the infected share of the population to a level where you can do testing, tracing, isolating, and only then, or when a vaccine finally comes along, can you really start to reopen safely. So I've been saying that it's like putting the economy in an induced coma, medically induced coma, where you shut things down for the sake of safety. Now the problem is that that's an inconvenience for people who are still earning, still have adequate incomes, but that's certainly tolerable. But it's a much bigger deal for people who lose their jobs, or for businesses that lose their business. And so the role of economic policy is to make that shutdown, that necessary shutdown that is there to save lives, tolerable. So it's really more disaster relief than it is stimulus, and there are ways to do it. And in fact, despite everything, almost despite ourselves, I think most of the advanced world is doing a significant amount. Not enough, but it's we've made it. The amount of misery out there is not nearly as much as the headline unemployment figures might suggest.
And in terms of going forward, lots of governments are now really trying to make that balance, and perhaps it is not a false choice, but they are kind of setting up a sort of health versus wealth choice, which is probably a false choice. What's your advice to them going forward? How should they be trying to manage easing the lockdown and trying to kind of get the economy going a wee bit? How do they manage that in a way which is safe to people's health, but also gets the economy going in the right way?
Well, you want to be extremely, extremely cautious. I mean, the thing about pandemics, is that if you are even just slightly, if each infected person infects just slightly more than one other person, then you have exponential growth. And so you don't want that to happen a second time. That's economically destructive, on top of killing a lot of people. So you want to be really, really cautious. You want to err on the side of doing less. You want to think it through, and you want to make sure you really don't want to reopen until you've got the number of infected people down a long ways, and you've got a whole testing and tracing, isolating infrastructure in place. Now that's not what's happening. What's happening is that we're instead seeing a kind of impatience, and I think so. So part of the whole problem is that, I'm obviously following my own country best. We've had a half effective response, enhanced unemployment benefits, some, but although that's programs are met, but some incentives for firms to keep workers on payroll, which has it's inadequate, but in fact most of the unemployed are in fact are receiving benefits which are making up most of the lost income. So we've done a lot, but the one side of our political spectrum hates that, and they are desperate to stop all of this aid to people in difficulty and reopen the economy instead. And I'm very nervous. I think we were just the data aren't conclusive yet, but it's starting to look as if we're losing. We're starting to see an uptick in hospitalizations, and so I have a lot of foreboding about where we're going right now.
Well, I think these divisions are very interesting because they are, there's a sense, I think, in certainly in my country, and I definitely feel in your country with the politics, there's the sort of doves versus the hawks in terms of the ideological differences and sort of this kind of false choice between health and wealth, which is just, it's not the way it should be. But in terms of, and I really like your analogy with aid and disaster relief, because this is exactly what this is. But in order to keep doing that, obviously that involves governments being prepared to spend the money, borrow money. Big borrowing means big debt, which is quite frightening to a lot of people because they have been educated to believe that debt is a bad thing. They're taught in their own lives debt is bad, right. And they're taught by the establishment in politics and economics that governmental debt is bad as well. So how do you argue the case for more spending when people are very nervous about the economic future?
Yeah, I mean, the thing to say, first off, is that view of debt, the analogy between an individual family's debt and the debt of a government is a very poor one. The tendency is to think, oh, if we have a lot of government debt, that means that we have borrowed at the expense of our future. But in fact, the debt is for the most part, leaving out international borrowing, but that has not actually a big factor in all of this. Who is the debt owed to? And the debt is owed to domestic residents. It's basically, I like to say that debt is money we owe to ourselves, which drives people crazy, but it's in fact the obvious truth. We have a big expansion right now in governmental debt, both sides of the Atlantic, and overwhelmingly that's matched by an increase in assets held by people. So what's really happening is, and one way to think about what's happening right now is that the government is channeling money from people whose livelihood is intact, but actually have money that they can't spend because there are a lot of things, they can't go to a restaurant and so on. It's channeling money from those people to people whose livelihoods have been temporarily suspended. And that's what we need to do. That's the social insurance aspect. But we're not paying for that with an immediate rise in taxes. We are instead paying for it by issuing IOUs, which is a perfectly reasonable and perfectly responsible thing to do. It would only be an issue if you thought that that we were imminently in danger of hitting the limits of what governments can credibly promise to repay. And we're nowhere close to that. None of us are. I mean, I actually like to look at the UK, the history of the UK. For much of the 20th century, the UK had huge debts. It came out of World War I with a big debt that it really didn't bring down. It came out of World War II with debt that was 250% of GDP. So way, more than double current levels. Never a problem. Advanced countries have an enormous ability to take on debts in times of emergency, which is where we are right now.
Although I think what is really missing is a kind of public explainer of how this debt works. Because in the United Kingdom, for example, that argument really wasn't made very effectively. We were told in subsequent elections after the global financial crisis, when our government, like many other governments, had to borrow a lot to stop our, banks and things going off a cliff edge, we were told, oh no, this is borrowing is bad, and debt is bad, and it's important to get the deficit down, and we have to pay off all this debt now. And that's why we needed fiscal restraint and austerity and really extreme cuts to public spending. And I think a lot of people bought that line, because they voted in governments who were promulgating that line. And yet austerity has not worked. Austerity has not worked for the United Kingdom. It's probably not worked for America. How do we better make that argument?
Well, okay, part of the problem...
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.